In today's episode, accidentally locking yourself out from the BIOS. Table called me retarded and requested a different server because I explained the salads weren't free. What's your Karen story? I put in my notice and GM decided to threaten me, so now I'm just not going to bother coming in. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Accidentally locking yourself out from the BIOS. I work in the IT department for a government organization in Canada. Ever since COVID lockdown started, the department has had an IT kiosk set up for employees to come back to the campus and receive support at a central location. I have helped a lot of people with a lot of things that ultimately don't deserve any kind of story here, but today I finally had a client to give me a good tale. The first client I saw this morning was an older guy who submitted a service request about not being able to log into his account. This is fairly common. With the way our secure networks operate, sometimes clients who change their user password remotely over the VPN lock themselves out of their account until they come back into the office and connect via Ethernet. So I look at this ticket and think, oh yeah, this won't be a problem. The guy comes in and I turn on his laptop, and before the laptop even posts to the Dell logo, a screen comes up demanding the administrator password before we can access the OS. I had never seen this before and my gut reaction was it was a BitLocker issue, but it looked entirely different. I asked the client if this was new and he said that it was the reason he came in. So not exactly what the ticket says, but no big deal yet. I ask him to sit tight and bring his laptop to the admin at the kiosk, and he has no idea what the problem is, so he tells me to ask our team lead. I ask the team lead and he also has no clue, so he tells me to ask the guy in the backroom since he handles all the imaging and may have seen this before. I go to the guy in the backroom and he also had never seen this before. There is a new guy working and he says he has seen this before, and it is a BIOS password. I am dumbfounded thinking that the client had opened the BIOS to change his account password, which is just not the way to do it. So I go back to the client and before I can say anything he says there was something he did not tell me. The client explains that after he changed his user password there was a program he was trying to use that he was not able to log into. He thought it was because he changed his user password. Of course it doesn't work that way, but sometimes clients just have limited knowledge of how these things work. I ask him to use his new password on this screen and it doesn't work. I ask him exactly how this happened and he says that he was just trying to follow an email he was sent to get his BitLocker code. We straight up do not give those codes out. They allow the unlocking of drives, so it is pretty important for a government organization that we keep that stuff under lock and key. I ask him why he was looking for his BitLocker code and he said he wasn't sure. I was getting confused at this point and asked what the email was for. He said it was for getting the BitLocker code. I tried to clarify and asked what the purpose of the email was for, as in why did he need the BitLocker code? He said he didn't know why. I was getting even more confused. I asked where the email was from and he said he wasn't sure, it was something that was sent to him 2 years ago. I let him know that the BitLocker codes are pretty important, and we don't have any way for clients to get their own, and he just shrugged his shoulders and said that he was just following the email. I asked him if he has the BitLocker code and he had it written down. I double-checked with the code in the Active Directory and, not surprisingly, it was not correct. He said that it may be the code for his personal laptop. He said he followed the email until it asked him to go into the BIOS, which at that point he said he chickened out. He definitely did go into the BIOS and either did not know what he was doing or was lying to me. In hindsight, I should have asked him to forward that email to me, but at the time I was just confused and swapped his laptop for a new one. He is costing the government a new motherboard because of some random 2-year-old email that he followed without knowing why he was doing any of it. Table called me retarded and requested a different server because I explained the salads weren't free. Here's how the salad pricing works at my restaurant works. It isn't free with every guest that walks in, but it comes free with any entree order, or you can have soup instead. Basically, you can pick a soup or a salad to come with the entree. With this particular table, it was 3 people, a woman, a kid, and a guy. The first 2 came in and said they were waiting on the guy. I get their drink orders and then leave them to wait, checking in once or twice. Eventually the guy comes in and naturally, I see about getting his drink order then letting them look at the menu. The guy wants to tell me his entree order first, so I take it and ask, "And would you like the soup or the salad?" He says salad, but then looks confused and asks, "Wait, the salad comes free anyway, right?" Essentially he was asking if he gets free salad no matter what, regardless if he has it with the meal. I just briefly explained that it isn't free, the entree comes with a choice of soup or salad. Basically, as I said, the entrees comes with a choice of soup or salad. The reason I state this is because many guests assume that it's free upon walking in, so they try to order something that results in an extra charge, then become upset even if I explain it to that effect it will result in an extra charge. There are even some that assume ordering only waters will get a free salad, though it is very rare. Then he looks at me funny, tells me, "Man, you confusing me," then tells me his drink order and to give him a minute. I thought maybe he wanted to reconsider or something. He then goes to the host and requests a different server, while saying I think he's slow or retarded or something. I get told this by the host as I'm getting his drink. Naturally I'm agitated and don't want them in my section. They stayed in my section for the whole meal while another person dealt with them. I talked with the managers about how rude they were acting to the staff, including the host, but they said apparently they can't throw them out or move them for that. Though one professed he wanted to for them acting so bluntly rude to the staff. Only to find out later that they should have been thrown out according to company the GM. The only funny part is that the server who took over for me got their food order wrong, and since it was my section, they basically got ignored the whole time since their server had other tables halfway across the building. Hopefully this version of the posts goes a little better, but needless to say this was very frustrating to be insulted and trying not to get visibly angry. Mind you, I wasn't rude to them or trying to cause tension. I just explained simple restaurant policy. What's your Karen story? I'm a new server and had one hell of a Karen the other day. It began the moment he got seated his mother, complaining about a splinter that he got from the edge of a table. I suggest drinks and he tells me he's so hungry that he doesn't want drinks, he wants food and to know if we have a shrimp trio. I tell him no, I just studied the menu. He insists that he's a regular and for me to check. I check and again tell him no. I ask again about drinks or an appetizer, and he says he needs a moment to look over the menu because he just sat down. I go to my others then come back. He says he wants to do our special feast. Appetizer, 2 entrees, 2 sides EA and 1 dessert. I ask him about the appetizer and insists that his potato skins come out extra crispy or else he won't like it. I tell him I'll do that. Of course he makes me send it back. He then tells me he doesn't want any upgraded items. I point to the menu and show him exactly where the upgraded items are in bold. I work at a steakhouse and he asks what we have that isn't red meat or pork for his mother. I tell him the salmon and the shrimp. He then asks again, so I tell him the exact same thing. He asks me about what tender meats we have, and I describe them, and suggest the filet mignon he says he doesn't want. So I tell him the rib eye is marbled and very flavorful. He asks if I can get his ribeye butterflied. I tell him it's an option, then I'll let him know. He orders a salad and sides, then complains about not having drinks. I bring out their food and he asks me if my napkins that I'm holding their plates with are clean. After his food comes out, he asks me to hand grind pepper on his steak and all over his plate. I check back to see that everything is cooked perfect, then I come back to ask about the included dessert. He tells me he's chewing his food, and that if he talks he's going to choke and he'll let me know that he's ready. When I come back to check on him, I show him the dessert menu of what's actually included, and he tells me he's watching his sugar intake. He asks if he can just have some ice cream scoops and fudge. I oblige just to get him out. His mom had a coupon for the special which was expired, so I tell my manager, and the manager rings in a separate discount. After I bring him the check, he tells me he wants the discount that his mom had. I tell him we no longer have that offer and he can talk to my manager. My manager tries to talk him for 20 minutes. Another table overhears and is fed up. On their way out, they start yelling and call him rude and are about to throw hands him, claiming they physically assaulted his mom. He stays seated for another 30 minutes before finally leaving. I put in my notice and GM decided to threaten me, so now I'm just not going to bother coming in. I'd been working at a certain Australian-themed restaurant in the US for a little over a year. I recently found a new job relating to my major, chemistry, and accepted their job offer. Unfortunately, the training that I was required to attend was only just over a week away, and I couldn't provide a proper 2 weeks' notice. But hey, a 1-week notice is better than none at all, I thought. Some backstory: we'd been chronically understaffed for a long time, and we'd been having a hard time holding on to any decent new hires because of how chaotic this particular restaurant is, and how sh*TTY our GM is. I think we'd hired like 8 people in the last couple of weeks, and only one of them had made it more than a week. This is particularly bad, because I think we were even more short-staffed than we were last year. Anyways, I typed up a notice and I brought it into work with me yesterday. I brought to one of my salaries and, to her credit, she was genuinely happy for me. While she was sad to see me go, she was glad I was now able to put my degree to use, and was moving on to where she knew I wanted to go in life. I went on with my shift, thinking everything was going fine. Fast forwards to like 9 p.m.ish, and I had a training meal I needed comped for training someone who walked out earlier that day, but I was still promised a training meal. I go find our GM, who's sitting off in a booth on an empty side of the restaurant. I'm about to tell him about my training meal when he says he was just about to pull me aside and talk to me. So I patiently sit down and he talks to me about the notice, congratulating me and asking this and that, and kissing my ass for how hard I'd been working for the company. Then he goes into V-Day and V-Day weekend, talking about how packed it's going to be, how he's been begging people to work extra hours, and how some people from the past are coming back to help, etc. Then he asks me if I could possibly work on the 12th and 14th, and see if my new employers would be willing to push back training, since we need you those 2 days. I tell him what he wants to hear, and that I could try, but I seriously doubt it since the training only happens once a month and I had already signed an acceptance of my job offer. He starts subtly badmouthing them, saying, well, I mean, if they won't show flexibility with you, and I don't know how it'll be work for them, but I don't know what kind of company they'll end up being. And then he moves on to the ultimatum: I don't know how it'll go, but you've been a good employee for us, but we really need you those 2 days. You can have any job you want to do, and we'll give you any hourly rate. But just know, if you can't work either of those 2 days, then you won't be leaving us on good terms. You won't be allowed back. I'd really hate to do that to you, so be sure to ask them. I just keep nodding to move the conversation to its end, and go back to work for the rest of the shift. Who does he think he is? I gave my notice as a gesture of good faith, when honestly he didn't deserve it. I could have just no-showed altogether the moment I got the other job, but I didn't, since I wanted to remain professional. And he thinks it's appropriate to threaten Maya's afterwards? He doesn't have any leverage on me, nor did I ever intend on returning to this place, but the fact that he felt that he could give me an ultimatum to work on days I just told him I couldn't and risk the start of a career just so he could be ever so slightly less understaffed is just mind-boggling. It's outrageous. And that's why I'm going to no-show anyways for Friday and the rest of the time I indicated. I refuse to work for someone who has such little respect for me and my own goals that he thinks I'll actually put them aside to and put my job in jeopardy before it even began. If he's so intent on putting me in a position to burn bridges, then I'll do it on my own terms. I'm sorry for this unhinged rant, but I needed to vent before I drew up the HR compliant. Update: he just updated my schedule to work on the 12th, before I even agreed to work that day. As if.